to make the player move, we need to take a look on the player object. So let's double click on it and let's take a look at what we have here. First of all, we set the name and the sprite of the player, but we have two very large panels here. One says events and another one says actions. So what are these two? Events are things that happen at a certain moment of time. So it could be a party, it could be an event, maybe a Christmas dinner. So things that are going to happen at a certain moment of time. And actions are the things that you do in these events. So if there's a party coming on, maybe, for example, you want to put some nice clothes on, maybe put a cologne. Okay, you're going to take an action, you're going to do something. Okay, so you can think of these as action and reaction. When something happens, you do something else. Okay, and this is more or less how it works on computers and on games in general. You wait for events to happen, like mouse clicks or keystrokes, or maybe pressing buttons. And when these things happen, actions are going to be taken. Okay, just like you're watching this video, you had to press the play button for this video to run, for example, and the video started running. Okay, you see a sequence of images with an audio of me speaking. Okay, and for making movement, we're going to use a key event. So here in the events panel, you're going to click on add event, then you're going to select keyboard, and finally you're going to press right. Okay, so you have the keyboard event for the right key. It's the right arrow key. And now you need to do something. You need to make the player move. So in GameMaker, you have lots and lots of actions pre-made here in the editor. Okay, so this is very, very good because you can make entire games in GameMaker without having to write a line of code. So it is very interesting to understand how these work for you to learn more about GameMaker. However, we want to learn how to code. Okay, even though we have these options, when you code, you have much more freedom. Okay, you have more ease to change things and to move things from a place to another. Actions, they work just great, but when you use code, you can make things even better. Okay, so to make the player move, we're going to drag this piece of code here, this execute code. Alright, and after that you're going to see this little text editor here where we need to make the player move. And to make the player move, you just have to write speed equals to 3 and a semicolon. Okay, so let me explain you two things. Things in computers, they are stored in memory. Okay, it's a certain position in your computer that you're going to store data like numbers and strings or images, for example. And when we type speed here, we're accessing a place in the memory which is called with this name. Okay, where GameMaker called speed. And when we use this equal sign, that it's not like math. Okay, we're not making an equation here. This is making an assignment. Okay, so what we're doing here is assigning the number 3 to the position in memory which is called speed. Okay, and so basically this is how you change the speed of objects in GameMaker. They're just going to start to move just by typing that. And this semicolon here is just to say that you finish your statement. Okay, your statement is basically this, what you wrote here. Okay, and GameMaker conveniently added lots and lots of variables for us. Okay, this is a variable, so you can access variables like direction, and you can use image blend, for example. You have several different things you can use, but for movement, speed equals 3 should be fine. Okay, and here's another note for you, something that is important. When you're coding, you can add comments. Okay, and comments are lines that in the GameMaker language start with two slashes, but in other languages it could be a hashtag symbol, for example, or different code, whatever. It doesn't matter what characters you use. But comments are things that are not processed by the compiler. However, they are very important because they help you understand what your code is doing. Sometimes it is obvious, but some other times you might make a very complex logic, for example, to build a mahjong or a mahjong board, for example. It is a very difficult logic to understand at first, but when you write comments, when you write in human language what you're doing, it is much easier for you and for other people who are going to work with you to understand how it works. So Here we can just type move to the right. Okay, we're just saying that our player is going to move to the right. Okay, and if we press this green tick here to save things, you're going to see that we now have an action, the action that we just made, and it is called execute a piece of code. If you were to drag here more pieces of code, if you drag more of these execute code pieces here, you'd have several things which are just called execute a piece of code, and that doesn't say much. So what if you want to rename this action? It is very simple. You can just open it. And in the first line where we added a comment, instead of using two slashes, you can use 3. So this becomes the title of the action. Okay, so you see it is now called move to the right. Okay, let's see how this is going to look. We're going to click here on run the game. We wait for the code to compile, for everything to be ready for us. And after it is, we have here our window, we have a player. If we press the right key, our player starts moving. Okay, so what if you want to make the player move to the left? Can you try and do that by yourself, adding the event and writing the necessary code? Pause the video right now and try to do this. Okay, to do this, we just click on add event, keyboard, then left, the left arrow key. We're going to drag this execute code action. Now the title of this is going to be move to the left, and on speed, instead of using 3, we're going to use -3, and I'm going to explain that to you shortly. Okay, so let's save these changes. We're going to click here on run the game, wait for the code to be ready for us, wait for the window to open and the splash screen to disappear, so we can move to the right and to the left. We can move to both directions. So why did we use -3? Okay, so in general, in game engines, you have a certain coordinate system being used. And in GameMaker, the origin is the top left of the window. And from that origin, you have two arrows that move, two invisible arrows. So they look like this. And the first arrow, the one at the top, is the X. And the one that moves to the bottom is the Y one. Okay, so this is the horizontal axis and this is the vertical axis, and we have our player here in the middle of that axis at a certain position. That position in this case, it could be something like, let's see, 40-30. Okay, so 40 pixels on the horizontal and 30 pixels on the vertical axis. Okay, it's something like this. This is 40 and this is 30. Now if you want to make the player move to the right, you need to use a positive speed, because the player by default is pointing to the right. Okay, so if you set a positive speed, if you set the speed to be 3, then the player will effectively move to the right. However, if you set the speed to -3, then the player will effectively move to the left, and that's why this works. Okay, you just have to imagine that you have this coordinate system being used here, and positive X is to the right and negative X is to the left, and this is how it works. Okay, so there are two things we need to do yet. Right now, if you press the arrow key, the player is going to move forever to the last direction that you pressed. And also, if the player leaves the screen, it's going to be disappear forever. Okay, the player won't go back unless you walk all the way back to the beginning of the game. So we can use two things to solve this. Let's add two events. Let's click on add event and select create. And let's also click on add event and select step, and then select step again. These are the two most important events when you're making games in general. It could be any engine, because the create event is called whenever your object is ready to be used. So when it is properly loaded, when everything required for it to appear is loaded as well, the object will throw the create event. And the step event is called every time your object is processed by the room. So if the room runs at a speed of 60 frames per second, then the step event for the player object is going to happen 60 times a second. So this is perfect for checking some things. Okay, so let's go to the create event, and now we're going to go to the move tab here in actions, and we're going to select this block here, the set friction. I'm going to drag it here, and let's set the friction as 0.1. Okay, this is essentially something that is going to make your speed go to 0. Okay, it's something that will hold you for moving forever. Let's click OK here, and in step we're going to select, let me see, this one here, wrap screen, this one with two arrows, one crossing the other. So we drag here and drop here, and essentially you're just going to see the direction where the player is going to wrap. So if they leave the screen from the left, they will appear in the right, and if they leave in the right, they're going to appear in the left side. Okay, so we just leave horizontal, we press OK here. So let's try this out. We're going to click on Run the Game. So our project is saved, the code is compiled. If we have any mistakes, we would know by now. And there we go, we have our player. If we hold down the right key, it moves. If we release, it stops moving. Okay, so we can move our player to all sides. And if for some reason your player decides to leave the screen on the left, they appear in the right, and vice versa. If they leave on the right, they appear on the left. Okay, so we have the basic movement mechanics here. We have something nice going on. So we have a player which can move around. There's a tree in the middle, and now what we have to do is we have to make apples. Okay, we have to make apples, and these apples, they need to be collected, and also they need to fall. So let's start with the easy part. We're going to start by making some apples in the ground and making the player collect them. Okay, we're going to do this in the next lesson. Add apples to the game, we need to make a sprite of it. So let's go to the sprites folder, we right click and select create sprite. The name of the sprite is going to be spr_apple, and we're going to click on edit sprite. Let's create a new one, and let's set its size to be 48 by 48 pixels. Okay, let's hit OK. We double click to open it and give this a nice zoom. So let me see, how am I going to draw an apple? Okay, I'm going to choose the black color to be the outline and red to be the fill, of course. So we're probably going to use two ellipses here. Okay, let me change it to the outline and fill. Make sure you select the proper shape here. I'm going to use outline and filled. Yeah, okay, this should work. So let's start by drawing one ellipse here. Okay, so it looks like this, and another one from this side. Okay, maybe a bit more to here. Let's increase the bottom part of this apple, and let's select red again to deselect to maybe erase this outline that got here in the middle, so it looks like this. And then let's add let's select the black color to add this little detail at the top, and then a green leaf. Okay, so I'm going to choose this one, and it's going to look like this. Oh well, this wasn't as bad as I imagined. Okay, so it at least resembles a little bit as an apple. Okay, so let me choose a darker gray here just to put it in the middle of the leaf. Yeah, okay, it should work. So we have a gigantic apple here. We're going to click on this little green tick here to save it. Let's click it again. So we have an apple. We're going to click on center to make sure that the origin of the apple is properly centered, of course. And we're going to click OK, so our sprite is saved. So let's go ahead and make the apple object as well. We're going to right click on the objects folder, select create object, then obj_apple. In sprite, we're going to click here and select spr_apple, and we're going to hit OK. Right, so now let's go to the game room here, and let's add a few apples in the floor just to keep things simple, just for us to understand how collisions would work. So we're going to select the Objects tab, and here where it says Object to add with left mouse, we're going to click on this button and select obj_apple, and we're going to click around just to add a few apples in the floor. Okay, this is not going to be the final mechanics, of course, because the apples are going to fall from the tree. Okay, so we add them here, and if we hit play, of course, we have our player and we can move to get these apples, but we didn't write any logic to make these apples disappear when they collide with the player. So we need to check if the player, the instance of the player object here is colliding with an apple, and when this happens, the apple disappears. And this is basically what we're going to do. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's go to the player object. Okay, we have several events for the player here, and we can click on add event. Okay, we're going to select the collision button, so the collision event, and we're going to set the collision with an apple. Okay, so collisions in GameMaker, and in most game engines in general, they always happen in a one-by-one basis. So you have to check collisions between players and apples, players and, I don't know, spikes, players and lava, for example. You always check one by one. So we're going to check with apples, and what we're going to do is let's drag a piece of code here. Let's drag this execute code. Okay, and whenever a collision happens, you have two objects. Okay, you have two references. The first one is called self, and the second one is called other. Okay, self is a way to reference the object, the script that is running. Okay, so since we are writing this piece of code in the player, self is a reference to the player, and other is a reference to the other thing that collided with the player. In this case, other is a reference to the apple. Okay, and now, knowing that, how do we destroy the apple? We need to type this with, and between parentheses, other. Let's open curly braces and close curly braces, and in here we're going to type instance underscore destroy. Okay, so there are lots of new things here. Let's go one by one here. First of all, when you're looking here at the game and you see this player and you see these apples, what you see here are not objects, they are instances of these objects. Because objects, they are kind of models, they are prefabs, they are things that you copy and you clone for them to appear in the game. And we don't call it clone, we call it instantiation. This is the process of instantiation, is getting the object, cloning it, and adding an instance of that object in the game. Okay, so let's go back to the code. So we are here. When we say with, and when we use other between parentheses, whatever we put in between these curly braces is in the scope of the apple. Okay, is in the scope of the other, the thing that collided with you. So here, when we say instance underscore destroy, it's like we're saying, hey, we are inside the apple now, and we are calling a function called instance destroy. And that name is very straightforward. This function is going to destroy the apple. Okay, and what are functions? Functions are it is a routine of code. Okay, it's a sequence of operations that are going to run that are going to impact your game. In this case, it just destroys the instance. And in order to call a function, you type its name, and then you open and close parentheses, and if you have any arguments in this function, you type the arguments here. So 1, 2, 3, if you had any, of course. In this case, we don't have to do this. And we, as always, we finish with a semicolon here to finish this statement. Okay, so let's give this a try. Let's click on run the game now and wait for the code to compile and check if we can touch and destroy these apples. Okay, there we go. We have a player here, so if we touch an apple, the apples disappear, okay, one by one. Alright, so we already have a logic for collecting these apples. Now we need to make them appear here at the tree. Okay, so it would make more sense if these apples were here in the tree and they fell to the ground. Okay, so they're going to move in these directions. Okay, now the logic will be, if the apple touches the ground, then it is going to be destroyed. Okay, it's going to disappear. And if the apple touches the player, then it is going to disappear as well. Okay, it's going to disappear, but in this case, it will add a score to the player, which we're going to see later. Okay, so first of all, we need to make the logic for the apples falling. So let's move them upwards. Okay, we're going to get them at the top part of the room. Okay, so let's go to the room, and we're going to move them here so they fall from the tree, and we need to make the falling logic for them. Okay, so we're going to make them move downwards and check if, as usual, if we collide with the player, and if the apples they reach the ground, then the game is going to be over. Okay, then the apples are going to disappear. Let's do this in the next video.